Have you ever had the feeling that something invisible is determining your choices without you noticing? That strange sensation that even when you believe you're making a completely personal and free decision, forces you cannot control have already defined the path you will follow? I'm not talking about conspiracy theories about mind control or direct manipulation, but about something much more subtle and deep that is redefining what it means to be an individual in the contemporary world. Think about the last product you bought online or the last political opinion you formed. How truly yours was that choice? The uncomfortable truth that few are willing to face is that the concept of individuality we inherited from the last centuries is dissolving rapidly before our eyes, replaced by a new reality we still struggle to fully understand. For millennia, human beings lived in communities where the individual was secondary to the group. The idea that each person is a separate, unique entity with inalienable rights and a voice that deserves to be heard is extremely recent in human history. It was only in the last few centuries that we developed this narrative of the autonomous individual capable of making independent choices based on a stable inner core we call identity. The Enlightenment and later Romanticism celebrated this idea. Market capitalism turned it into fuel for consumption, and liberal democracies enshrined it in their constitutions and bills of rights. Thus was born the modern myth of the sovereign individual, the one who, regardless of external circumstances, possesses an authentic inner self and an inalienable freedom to make choices that express that self. This narrative became so fundamental to our civilization that we rarely question it. We built our lives, economies, political systems, and moral values around it. But what happens when we discover that this sovereign individual may never have existed the way we imagined? And even more disturbing, what happens when technology exposes the cracks in this illusion, showing that we are far more influenceable, predictable, and interconnected than our favorite myth suggests? Evidence is starting to pile up alarmingly. Modern neuroscience has already shown that many of the decisions we attribute to our conscious will are actually taken by unconscious brain processes seconds before we have the subjective feeling of deciding. Cognitive psychology has cataloged hundreds of biases that systematically distort our perceptions and choices, often without us having any awareness of it. Behavioral genetics suggests that characteristics we consider deeply personal, from musical preferences to political tendencies, have significant hereditary components. Social sciences show how our behaviors and beliefs are shaped by structural factors far beyond our individual control, but perhaps nothing has exposed the fragility of the autonomous individual as clearly as the digital revolution of recent decades. The algorithms that power our social networks and digital platforms can now predict our behaviors with unsettling precision. Studies show that with just a few dozen likes, an algorithm can predict your political preferences, sexual orientation, personality traits, and emotional vulnerabilities more accurately than your close friends. With a few hundred interactions, these systems can know aspects of your behavior that even you do not consciously perceive. And this raises a deeply uncomfortable question for our self-understanding as individuals. If an algorithm can predict what I will do better than I can, what does that say about my supposed autonomy? If my emotional reactions, desires, and even my deepest opinions can be mapped, predicted, and eventually manipulated by increasingly sophisticated systems, what remains of the sovereign individual celebrated by liberal humanism? Here we are not talking only about targeted advertising or product recommendations. We are witnessing the emergence of an unprecedented ability to shape human behavior on a massive scale. Digital platforms are not just neutral tools we use, but carefully designed environments that shape our attention, emotions, and behaviors in fundamental ways. When you spend hours endlessly scrolling your screen, it is not because you made a free and conscious choice, but because extremely skilled behavioral engineers designed systems that exploit the vulnerabilities of your brain to keep you engaged. The attention economy is based precisely on the ability to capture and direct your mental focus, turning your consciousness into a resource to be mined and sold. Even when we believe we are expressing our most authentic thoughts on social networks, we are actually participating in a complex system that shapes those expressions according to engagement metrics and amplification algorithms that favor certain types of emotional content. Outrage, anger, and polarization are not accidents in this system, but predictable consequences of its architecture. All of this forces us to deeply reconsider what it means to be an individual in the digital age. The traditional image of the self as a stable, coherent, and autonomous entity is being challenged not only by scientific discoveries, but by the very daily experience of existing in digital environments that fragment our attention and modularize our identity. Perhaps today it is more accurate to think of the individual not as a singular and sovereign entity, but as a nexus of influences, a temporary point of convergence in a complex network of biological, technological, economic, and social forces. This view is not necessarily pessimistic. Recognizing the limits of traditional individuality can free us from unrealistic expectations and help us develop a more accurate understanding of how we really function. But it also raises urgent questions about how to preserve values we associate with the individual, such as dignity, moral responsibility, and meaningful freedom, in a world that increasingly reveals the contingent and interconnected nature of our existence. To better understand this transformation, we need to step back and examine how we got here. For most of human history, people did not primarily see themselves as autonomous individuals in the modern sense. In tribal hunter-gatherer societies, identity was intrinsically tied to the group. In ancient agricultural civilizations, it was defined by social position, family lineage, and role in the broader cosmic order. Even in medieval Europe, the person was understood mainly through relationships and obligations within a community, guild, or religious order. The idea of the individual as the fundamental unit of society and bearer of inalienable rights began to emerge more clearly during the European Renaissance, gained philosophical force with the Enlightenment, and crystallized politically with the American and French revolutions. Thinkers like Locke, Kant, and Mill articulated visions of the human being as naturally free and rational, capable of self-determination. This conception of individuality soon intertwined with nascent capitalism and the Industrial Revolution, which began to dissolve traditional social structures and create societies based on contracts, markets, and mobility. During the 19th and 20th centuries, this notion of individuality deepened and spread globally, supporting everything from mass consumerism to civil rights movements. The idea that each person has an authentic inner self that deserves expression and recognition became practically a dogma in contemporary culture. However, even as we celebrated the individual, powerful forces were already in motion that would eventually challenge that conception. Mass production and modern advertising began to create standardized consumers. Government and corporate bureaucracies treated people as interchangeable units. And the rise of modern psychology began to reveal how deeply we are influenced by unconscious forces. The digital revolution has drastically accelerated these trends. When we enter social networks, we do not simply find a neutral space for individual expression. We enter environments meticulously designed to shape behaviors, extract data, and generate engagement. Every like, share, comment, and even the time we spend watching certain content feeds systems that build increasingly precise models of who we are, how we react, and what we will likely do next. We are witnessing the emergence of what some call surveillance capitalism, where the target is not only our money or time, but our very subjective experience transformed into behavioral data that can be analyzed, sold, and used to shape future behaviors. At an unprecedented level, our seemingly personal choices are being influenced by systems designed to maximize not our well-being or autonomy, but commercial metrics such as screen time, clicks, and conversions. What makes this situation even more complex is the fact that we are not passive victims. We actively participate in this system, often enthusiastically. We voluntarily upload intimate details of our lives, express our opinions and emotions, and entrust growing aspects of our existence to digital platforms. We are in a symbiotic relationship with technology, where it simultaneously amplifies some of our capabilities while subtly reshaping who we are. This transformation raises profound questions about autonomy and authenticity. When a recommendation algorithm suggests a book that I end up loving, is that experience less authentic because it was partially orchestrated by an automated system? When my political indignation is amplified by a news feed designed to maximize emotional engagement, are those emotions less genuine? The answer is not simple. We are entering a territory where the lines between personal choice and external influence, between authenticity and manipulation, between the self and the system, are becoming fundamentally blurred. Artificial intelligence adds another layer to this complexity. As AI systems become more sophisticated, they not only track and influence our behavior, but begin to perform functions traditionally associated with human agency. Algorithms now write texts, create art, compose music, diagnose diseases, and make decisions that affect our lives in countless ways. In some domains, they already consistently surpass human capabilities. This not only challenges our sense of human exceptionalism, but also raises questions about what truly constitutes thought, creativity, and understanding. If an AI system can write moving poetry, solve complex problems, and hold meaningful conversations, what does that tell us about those activities we once considered exclusively human? What do consciousness and subjectivity mean in a world where increasingly sophisticated behaviors can emerge from systems without those qualities as we understand them? Philosopher Daniel Dennett suggests that perhaps we should see the human mind not as a single unified entity, but as a collection of multiple processes and subsystems working in parallel, something like a society of minds within the brain. In this view, the feeling of being a unified, coherent self is partly a useful illusion, a simplification our brains create to navigate a complex world. If this is correct, our individuality was already much less solid and more distributed than we tend to imagine even before the digital age. Contemporary technological environments only make this reality more evident and amplify its scale. They force us to confront the fact that the individual, as conceived by liberal humanism, with its stable core and sovereign will, may be more a specific cultural construction than a universal truth about the human condition. I need to stop for a moment and ask you directly, which aspect of this dissolution of self-boundaries in the digital world most awakens your fear or apprehension? Do you lie awake at night thinking about this too? I know that many of us keep these concerns to ourselves, perhaps for fear of seeming paranoid or technophobic in a world that celebrates every new innovation without question. But your concerns are valid and probably shared by more people than you imagine. Share in the comments. My greatest fear about the transformation of individuality is your voice can help create a space where we can honestly discuss these collective fears instead of suppressing them. And perhaps by naming these fears together, we can begin to imagine ways to face them. A critical point to consider is that this transformation does not affect everyone equally. Access to digital technologies, exposure to algorithmic surveillance, and the ability to exercise some control over one's digital presence vary enormously depending on factors such as geography, social class, education, and privilege. In some parts of the world, people struggle to obtain basic internet access, while in others, privileged individuals can hire services to manage and protect their online identity. There is a variable geometry of power and vulnerability in the digital world, where some have more capacity than others to maintain some semblance of traditional individuality. Furthermore, the very technologies that challenge our notion of individuality were developed in specific cultural contexts, mainly in Silicon Valley, and they embody particular values and assumptions. The emphasis on data collection, personalization, and engagement is not an inevitable outcome of technology, but reflects specific choices about how to design digital systems, often driven by commercial imperatives. In other words, the way individuality is being transformed is not a natural or inevitable process, but the product of human decisions, economic systems, and power structures. This suggests that we could, in principle, make different choices about how to develop and regulate digital technologies. Some societies are already taking different paths. The European Union, for example, has implemented regulations such as the GDPR, aimed at giving individuals more control over their personal data, establishing a different model of relationship between people and digital platforms. China and Russia, on the other hand, are building digital ecosystems where the state has a central role in mediating online identity. We are in a formative moment where multiple visions of the digital future compete with one another. The question is not simply whether the traditional notion of individuality will survive, but what new concepts of personhood, identity, and autonomy are emerging, and which values they will embody. Historically, major technological transformations have been accompanied by deep changes in how human beings understand themselves. The invention of writing, the printing press, the mechanical clock, the Industrial Revolution, all fundamentally altered people's relationship with themselves and with the world. Each of these transitions was accompanied by anxiety, resistance, and eventually adaptation, with new cultural and philosophical forms emerging to make sense of the transformed reality. Plato, for example, expressed concern that writing would weaken human memory and produce only a semblance of wisdom. In a way, he was right. Writing fundamentally changed how we store and process knowledge, but it also opened possibilities unimaginable in a purely oral culture. Similarly, the digital revolution is forcing us to re-examine basic assumptions about who we are. The self-sufficient, autonomous, unified individual we inherited from liberal humanism is being challenged by a reality in which we are increasingly understood and understand ourselves as nodes in complex networks of relationships, influences, and interconnections. Our minds extend into devices and systems beyond our skulls. Our identities are distributed across multiple platforms and contexts. Our choices are shaped by algorithmic forces we barely begin to understand. It is natural to feel anxiety in the face of this transformation. The model of individuality being challenged is not just an abstract theory, but the foundation of how we organize our lives, societies, and systems of value. Concepts like moral responsibility, human dignity, political freedom, and artistic expression are all deeply intertwined with the notion that we are, in some fundamental sense, self-contained individuals with the capacity to make autonomous choices. What happens to these values in a world where the boundary between self and system becomes increasingly porous? For example, our legal systems are built upon the notion of individual responsibility. We presume that people are autonomous agents responsible for their actions. But how can we assign responsibility in an environment where behavior is increasingly influenced or even determined by algorithmic systems designed to maximize engagement or profit? If a person is radicalized by a recommendation algorithm designed to maximize their screen time, who is morally responsible for the consequences? Similarly, our conceptions of privacy presume a clear distinction between public and private, between information that belongs to the individual and that which is legitimately accessible to others. But in a world of ubiquitous surveillance and massive data analysis, where even our typing patterns or eye movements can reveal intimate information about our mental health or sexual orientation, what remains of privacy as traditionally conceived? Perhaps more deeply, our understanding of meaning and purpose is often tied to the idea that we are authors of our own lives, able to define our values, set goals, and pursue our own path. But what happens to this narrative when our seemingly most personal choices are increasingly mediated, influenced, and even determined by algorithmic systems? How can we find meaning in a world where the very notion of authentic choice becomes problematic? These are not merely theoretical questions. They reflect dilemmas we already face in our everyday lives. When we spend hours absorbed in our screens, often against our best intentions, are we exercising freedom or being manipulated? When our news feeds present us a view of reality algorithmically customized to maximize our emotional engagement, are we really forming autonomous opinions about the world? When our social interactions are increasingly mediated by platforms designed to capture and monetize our attention, what happens to the authenticity of our connections? There are no simple answers to these questions. We are navigating unexplored territory, trying to develop new conceptual models for a rapidly transforming reality, but some promising directions are emerging. First, we may need to develop a more relational and less atomistic understanding of identity. Instead of thinking of the self as an isolated and self-contained entity, we can recognize that we have always been fundamentally defined by our relationships, contexts, and connections. The philosopher Charles Taylor argues that the self always exists within what he calls webs of interlocution. The social, linguistic, and cultural contexts that make identity possible. In this view, the erosion of the autonomous individual is not necessarily a loss, but an opportunity to rediscover something that has always been true, that we are constitutively social and interconnected beings. Second, we may need to re-evaluate our notions of agency and freedom. Instead of defining freedom as the absence of external influence, which becomes increasingly unsustainable in an algorithmic world, we can think of it in terms of our ability to critically reflect on the influences that shape us, to understand how the systems we inhabit are affecting us, and to consciously participate in the formation of these systems. Freedom in this sense is not the absence of external determination, but the capacity for critical engagement and conscious participation in our own formation. Third, we may need to develop a technological design ethic more centered on human flourishing. Instead of accepting the current paradigm where technologies are designed primarily to maximize engagement, data extraction, and profit, we can work to create digital environments that genuinely expand our capabilities, respect our autonomy, and promote fundamental human values. This requires not only appropriate regulation, but a profound re-evaluation of the purpose of technology in our lives. Finally, we may need to recover forms of experience and connection that exist outside the digital domain. As more aspects of our lives are mediated by screens and algorithms, direct contact with other human beings, with nature, and with our own unmediated bodily and mental processes may gain new importance and meaning. These may become spaces where different forms of individuality and connection can flourish, not in opposition to the digital world, but as a necessary counterpoint to it. The challenge before us is not simply to resist the dissolution of the traditional individual, which may be largely futile, nor to completely abandon the values associated with it, which would be potentially catastrophic. Instead, we need to reimagine what it means to be a person in a world where the boundaries between self and system, between personal choice and algorithmic influence, between human identity and technological processes, are becoming fundamentally blurred. This is not merely theoretical work. It is a practical and urgent task we all face as we try to navigate our daily lives in a radically transformed environment. How can we balance the convenience and possibilities of digital technologies with the need to preserve space for reflection, genuine choice, and direct human connection? How can we educate future generations not only to use technologies, but to understand how they are being used by them? How can we design our homes, cities, schools, and institutions in ways that promote conscious engagement with technology instead of unreflective dependence? These practical questions are inseparable from deeper philosophical questions about the nature of individuality, identity, and freedom in the digital age. A crucial point to consider is that although technology is fundamentally transforming our experience of individuality, it is not simply making us less individual in some absolute sense. Instead, it is creating new forms of individuality and collectivity simultaneously. On one hand, we have never had so many opportunities for personalized expression, access to diverse information, and connection with others who share specific interests. On the other hand, this personalization often occurs within systems that standardize, categorize, and influence our behavior in unprecedented ways. The irony is that the more digital platforms promise personalization, the more they can paradoxically make us predictable and manipulable. Algorithmic personalization is not the same as genuine self-determination. It often locks us into feedback loops that reinforce existing patterns instead of truly expanding our horizons. This is one of the central paradoxes of digital life. The same technology that seems to offer unlimited possibilities for individual expression also creates new forms of conformity, predictability, and control. We must also recognize that we are only at the beginning of this transformation. Artificial intelligence, virtual reality, brain-machine interfaces, biotechnology, and other emerging technologies will continue to fundamentally reshape our experience of being individuals in the coming years and decades. Each of these technologies brings exciting possibilities and profound risks. Brain-machine interfaces, for example, could allow new forms of communication, creativity, and cognitive expansion, but they also raise unsettling questions about the nature of mental privacy and the potential for direct manipulation of subjective experience. Similarly, advances in biotechnology may offer unprecedented possibilities for modifying and enhancing the human body, but they also challenge traditional notions of natural identity and raise questions about equity, consent, and the meaning of human nature. The philosopher Nick Bostrom has characterized these developments as potentially leading to an explosion of value where the range of possible experiences and ways of being would expand dramatically. But this explosion could also lead to the loss of values we consider fundamental to human experience if we do not carefully navigate these transitions. A crucial question is who will have a voice in the decisions that will shape these developments. Currently, many of the most consequential choices about how digital technologies are designed and implemented are made by a small number of technology companies, often with little public oversight or democratic participation. This raises serious questions about power, responsibility, and justice. Who benefits from these transformations? Who bears the costs? Who is excluded from the conversations that determine our shared future? To wisely navigate these issues, we need not only new technologies and regulations, but also new ways of imagining possibilities. We need new narratives, metaphors, and conceptual models that can help us understand what is happening to us and guide our individual and collective choices. The conceptual frameworks we inherited from liberal humanism, centered on the autonomous and rational individual, are no longer adequate to understand our emerging reality. This does not mean we should abandon the values underlying these frameworks, such as human dignity, freedom, and moral responsibility. It means we need to reimagine what these values mean and how they can be realized in a radically transformed world. For example, the concept of relational autonomy, developed by feminist philosophers such as Catriona Mackenzie and Natalie Stoljar, may offer a promising path. This approach recognizes that autonomy is not the absence of social influence, but the ability to negotiate relationships, critically reflect on external influences, and participate in shaping the social conditions that shape our existence. Instead of seeing autonomy as independence from relationships, this perspective understands it as flourishing within appropriate relationships. Similarly, the concept of contextual privacy, developed by Helen Nissenbaum, offers a more refined way of thinking about privacy in a digital world. Instead of conceiving privacy as simple control over personal information, an increasingly unsustainable view, Nissenbaum understands it as respect for contextually appropriate norms of information flow. This approach recognizes that we share information in different contexts with different expectations and norms, and suggests that privacy is violated when these contextual norms are broken. Another area where we need to develop new conceptual models is our understanding of the relationship between humans and technological systems. We need to go beyond the simple dichotomy between controlling technology or being controlled by it toward a more sophisticated understanding of how we are co-evolving with our technological environments. Philosopher Andy Clark suggests that human beings are natural cyborgs, organisms that have always extended their capacities through tools and technologies. In this view, the question is not whether we should integrate technology into our lives and identities, which we have been doing since the invention of language, but how to do it in ways that genuinely expand our abilities and respect our dignity. In developing new conceptual frameworks, we also need to be attentive to the diversity of human experiences and cultural traditions. Different societies and cultures have varied conceptions of personhood, identity, and the relationship between individual and community. Many non-Western traditions, for example, have more relational and less individualistic views of the self than the Western liberal tradition. These diverse perspectives can offer valuable resources for reimagining what it means to be a person in the emerging digital world. This work of reimagining is not only an intellectual task, but also an artistic, political, and deeply personal one. We need new types of art that can express and explore the experience of individuality in transformation. We need new political arrangements that can protect fundamental human values in the context of increasingly powerful technologies. And each of us needs, in our daily life, to find forms of conscious engagement with technology that preserve space for reflection, genuine choice, and direct human connection. What are the everyday practices, the small resistances and adaptations that can help us preserve a sense of agency and purpose in an algorithmic world? How can we use technology in ways that expand our capacities without compromising our autonomy? How can we create spaces, both digital and physical, that promote forms of interaction that respect our dignity and complexity as human beings? These are questions that all of us face, and there are no definitive answers or universal solutions. What works for one person may not work for another. What is liberating in one context may be oppressive in another, but the very act of asking these questions, of consciously reflecting on our relationship with technology, is an important step toward preserving some form of agency in a rapidly changing world. This work of reflection and adaptation is not something we do once and finish. It is an ongoing process that will require sustained attention, creativity, and commitment as technologies continue to evolve and reshape our lives in ways we can barely imagine now. What is at stake is not only how we use technology, but what kind of beings we will become through our engagement with it. If, as McLuhan famously observed, we first shape our tools and then our tools shape us, we are at a moment where we need to consciously decide what kind of shaping we will allow. This requires not only appropriate regulation and ethical technological design, but also a culture of critical and reflective engagement with technology. This engagement is not only for experts or philosophers, but for all of us who live increasingly in digitally mediated environments. A fundamental part of this engagement is recognizing that we are not alone in our struggles to navigate this new territory. Even though we often experience the challenges of digital life as purely individual problems, they are actually collective issues that require shared conversations, connections, and actions. When we struggle with screen addiction, social media anxiety, or information overload, we are not dealing with mere personal failures of self-control, but responding to environments consciously designed to capture and retain our attention. Recognizing the systemic dimension of these challenges can help us overcome shame and isolation and seek collective solutions beyond individual adaptations. We also need to recognize that our sense of identity and individuality is shaped not only by technology, but by many other factors, including personal relationships, bodily practices, physical communities, and cultural traditions. Although digital technology is becoming increasingly dominant in our lives, it is not the only force shaping who we are. We can consciously cultivate and strengthen these other dimensions of our experience as a counterpoint to the algorithmic logic that permeates so much of contemporary life. This is not a nostalgic call to return to some imagined pre-digital age, but a recognition that being human has always involved multiple dimensions of experience, and that we can consciously work to preserve this multiplicity even as we embrace the possibilities of new technologies. At the same time, we need to be realistic about the transformative power of digital technologies. We are not simply using neutral tools that we can pick up or put down at will. We are inhabiting environments that fundamentally shape how we think, feel, and relate to one another. As more aspects of our lives are digitally mediated, from education and work to love and leisure, the possibilities for non-algorithmic forms of experience become increasingly limited. In this context, the ability to consciously engage with technology, to understand how it is affecting us, and to make informed choices about our use becomes an essential life skill as fundamental as literacy or arithmetic. If these reflections have touched something you have been feeling, but perhaps have not found the words to express, know that you are not alone. By subscribing to the channel, you will connect with a growing community of people who share your concerns and your desire for a deeper understanding of the philosophical challenges of our time. Each week, we meet here to explore together the great questions that define our era and to seek not only understanding, but also wiser ways of living amid the transformations we are witnessing. This is not just a channel, but a space for dialogue and collective growth. Join us on this ongoing journey. Subscribe so we can continue this essential conversation about how to live with more wisdom and purpose in a world that often leaves us disoriented and divided. The central paradox we face is that the same technologies that challenge our traditional notion of individuality also offer us unprecedented possibilities for expression, connection, and expansion of our capabilities. It is not simply about resisting the dissolution of the traditional individual, nor about uncritically embracing every new technological innovation, but about consciously navigating between these possibilities to create ways of life that honor our shared humanity in all its dimensions. This navigation will be difficult, confusing, and often contradictory. There are no clear maps for the territory we are entering, only imperfect compasses based on values that we continue to consider important even as their meaning evolves. But perhaps this very uncertainty is fitting. Perhaps what it means to be human has never been fixed or determined, but always a work in progress, an open question that each generation must answer again in its own context. In this sense, the erosion of the traditional individual is not necessarily a tragic loss, but an opportunity to rediscover something that has always been true, that we are beings in constant transformation, defined not by some immutable essence, but by our relationships, practices, stories, and choices. If there is a lesson to be drawn from our exploration of individuality in transformation in the digital age, perhaps it is this, that we are at once more and less than the autonomous individual celebrated by liberal humanism. We are more because our existence extends beyond the boundaries of our individual bodies into complex networks of relationships, technologies, and shared meanings. And we are less because our illusion of sovereign control over our lives is constantly challenged by forces that operate beyond our awareness or choice. Recognizing both of these aspects of our condition is the first step in developing a more accurate self-understanding, and paradoxically, in exercising a more genuine form of freedom, a freedom not based on the fantasy of total control, but on conscious engagement with the realities of our interconnected and technologically mediated existence. In this ongoing journey of self-discovery and adaptation, we are not alone. We are part of a long lineage of human beings who faced profound transformations in how they understood themselves and their place in the world. From the first humans who developed language and began to tell stories, to those who witnessed the birth of writing, printing, the Industrial Revolution, and now the digital revolution, each generation had to reimagine what it means to be human in the face of technological and cultural change. This is our task now, not as isolated individuals, but as participants in an ongoing conversation that extends both into the past and into the future. Together, we can create not only new technologies, but new ways of being human that honor our dignity, complexity, and interconnectedness in all their dimensions.
Yuval, thank you so much for coming to Keio University.
Thank you for the invitation. It's an honor to be here.
We only have 30 minutes, so I'm going to bombard you with questions.
Absolutely.
So first question to you. When I assumed the position of the president of Keio University, let's say 4 years ago, the university library set up a shelf displaying must-read books recommended by president. And your book, 21 Lessons, occupied the center of the shelf.
Thank you.
That was 6 years ago. You published your 21 Lessons, and there you mentioned 3 big global threats. 1, nuclear warfare, of course including Putin's Russia, and 2, uncontrolled advancement of the biotechnology, including genome editing affecting humans itself, and 3, IT or information networks and AI. In a way, it is unchecked. So those are the 3 threats you mentioned. But for Nexus, you concentrated on IT networks, information networks, and AI only. Could you explain to me the reason behind this?
Well, if you compare AI and biotechnology, the most obvious thing is that AI just moves so much faster. Biotechnology can also change the world in a dramatic way, but it takes much, much longer because biology is much slower. Like if you make a change to the human genome, let's say to the genome of a human baby, and you want to know what the effects are and how to make an even bigger change in the future, you need to wait 20, 30, 40 years to see what is the impact of the new genetic material, the new genetic code on human behavior, human intelligence, human psychology. So a generation in biotechnology, when it comes to humans, is maybe 20 or 30 years. In AI, it could be just a few days. Digital evolution is moving millions of times faster than organic evolution. So without belittling the potential dangers and also opportunities of biotechnology, AI is just much, much faster. And with regard, when comparing AI, say, to the threat of nuclear war, here the reason to focus on AI are actually two reasons. First of all, nuclear war has no upside. So it has no supporters. Everybody, it's a huge, huge threat, especially in today's world, when we see that countries like Russia are just completely disregarding the biggest taboos of the international system. Since 1945, the biggest taboo of the international system was that a strong country cannot just invade and try to conquer and destroy a weaker country. And now this is broken. So the danger is huge, but at least everybody understands the danger. There are no winners in a nuclear war. With AI, it's a much more complicated challenge because there is a huge positive potential, and people find it very difficult to understand what the threats are. Ever since the bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, it was at least clear to humans what is the danger of nuclear technology. You don't need long explanations. With AI, it's difficult to grasp the danger because it's really an alien threat. The key problem with AI is not that it is evil. It's not evil. The key problem is that it is alien. It is an intelligence which could be superhuman in many ways, but it's not human, it's not organic. A lot of people ask, when will AI reach human level intelligence? The answer is never, because it's not like us at all. It's like asking, when will airplanes reach bird level flight? Never. Airplanes are just not like birds. They fly in a different way. So AI will surpass human intelligence, but it will be inherently alien. So it's very difficult to predict how it will develop and what the consequences will be. I'll say one more thing, and that's maybe the most important thing for everybody to understand about AI is that it is not a tool, it is an agent. It's the first technology we have ever created which is an agent and not a tool. An atom bomb or a nuclear reactor, the peaceful nuclear reactor that produces electricity, this is a tool in our hands. We decide what to do with it. Humans decide, we will use nuclear technology to produce electricity and not to destroy city. We make the decision. The reactor itself cannot make any decision. And of course, it cannot invent the next generation of reactors or of bombs. Only humans, until now, could make decisions and could invent new ideas. AI is the first technology that can do that without our help, without our intervention. AI can make decisions by itself. An AI weapon doesn't need human beings to tell it what to do. It can decide by itself what to bomb. And AI can even invent new weapons and new military strategies. It has, again, enormous positive potential. It can invent new medicines, new treatments for cancer. It has enormous negative potential. So this is why I chose to focus in this book only on the history of information technology, because I think at the present moment, it's the biggest challenge we face. Actually, in many ways, it's the biggest challenge that humanity faced in its history, because for thousands of years, we ruled the planet. Nothing on Earth could compete with us in intelligence, in the ability to invent new things. Now there is something on the planet, there is something on Earth which very soon, maybe within a few years, will surpass us in intelligence, will be able to make decisions about our lives, will be able to invent new everything from medicines to weapons. And that's the biggest challenge.
You just said that maybe in a few years, but as early as 2015, you published a book, Homo Deus, History of Tomorrow, or Future. There you also warned and actually concentrated on information technology, information networks. How is your thought right now compared to your thought, let's say 2015, when you wrote Homo Deus? It's been 10 years.
Yeah,
and you started as a historian and medieval military experts, and now you're focusing on, information networks and AI. Could you compare these, your development in past 10 years?
Yeah, I think 10 years ago when I wrote Homo Deus, all this talk about, very few people were talking about AI at the time. You had some people of course, in the computer science departments. You had people in the leading corporations, like Google and Microsoft, who already understood what was happening. And you had a few philosophers like Nick Bostrom, who published Superintelligence in 2014. But when I wrote Homo Deus, it felt like, we are talking about something that maybe will happen in hundreds of years, some philosophical speculations with very little immediate practical implications for our lives. Now it's all around us, and the pace of development is simply astounding. Already back then there were people like Ray Kurzweil also, who said that there will be AGI, artificial general intelligence, able to surpass human beings in all fields, not just a narrow field like playing chess or driving a car, but in all fields. They say by the end of the 2020s, by 2029. And even to me, when I read what Ray Kurzweil wrote, I thought, he's exaggerating. I can't be by 2029. Now Ray Kurzweil is still saying 2029, and he's considered one of the more conservative thinkers. Like you listen to the people who had the development effort in corporations in the US, in China, they were talking within a year, within 5 years, we'll have AGI. So it's sped up dramatically. The other thing is that all hopes of regulating this, of reaching some kind of agreement about this, seem now extremely naive. Certainly since the last US elections, I think really all hope of reaching a global agreement on how to manage the risk of AI development is gone. The big paradox of the AI revolution, I think at the heart of the AI revolution, there is a big paradox. And it's a paradox of trust. When you talk with the people who lead the AI revolution, the people who run companies like OpenAI, like Microsoft, like Tencent, like Baidu, when you talk with the leading politicians, I ask them two questions always.
Okay.
The first question I ask is, why are you moving so fast? Okay, yes, I understand there is enormous positive potential, but there are also risks. Let's slow down a little to give human society the time. Humans are extremely adaptive creatures. We can adapt to the AI age, but we just need time. Just give us a bit more time. And they all say the same thing. We understand there are huge risks as big as human extinction. We understand this. We would like to slow down, but we can't. Because if we slow down and our competitors in the other company, in the other country, they don't slow down, they will win the race. And the most ruthless people will then dominate the world because they will have this wonderful technology, AI. So because we cannot trust the other humans, we must move faster. And then I asked the second question, do you think you could trust the super intelligent AIs you are developing? And they say yes. The same people who, like a minute ago, told me we cannot trust the other humans, suddenly they become extremely trustworthy and they say, but we would be able to trust the AIs. And this is really on the border of insanity. Because, you know, with humans, I understand why it's difficult to trust the other humans. But we have thousands of years of experience with other human beings. We understand their psychology, their motivation. We know a lot about the human craving for power, but we also understand the mechanisms to check the pursuit of power. And over thousands of years, humans have developed ways to learn to trust each other. And you now have, 10,000 years ago, or 100,000 years ago, humans lived in tiny bands of a few dozen individuals, couldn't trust anybody outside their band. Now you have nations like Japan with hundreds of millions of citizens that can trust each other. The global trade network connects all 8 billion people on the planet. The food we eat, the clothes we wear, the medicine that protect us is often produced by strangers on the other side of the planet. So yes, there's still a huge problem how to trust other people, but we have experience in doing that. We have zero experience with super intelligent AIs. We have no idea what kind of goals and tricks they might develop. We have no idea what happens when you have millions and millions of super intelligent AIs interacting with each other and with millions of human beings. AI is not one single big computer somewhere. It's going to be, think about it as a wave of immigration sweeping over the entire world. You now have all these populist parties that are so afraid of immigrants. Oh, the immigrants will come. The immigrants will take our jobs. The immigrants they have different ideas about culture. They will take over our country. They will change our culture. We are so afraid. AI is a wave of millions of alien immigrants that will take people's jobs, that will have very, very different ideas about how to run societies, that could take over countries. This is should frighten people much more. And this is the big paradox. And the big question is, how do you build trust between humans before we develop super intelligent AI?
So you talk about trust between human and, let's say autonomous AI or
AI agents.
AI agents, yes. But also the trust between so-called elite and so-called, sort of normal citizen is, division is widening. Yeah. And of course the populist and or also dictator you mentioned in Nexus that they try to take advantage of AI as an agent, not as an agent, but as a tool right now.
Yeah.
But then consequence is going to be unknown because, as you mentioned. So how do you see the trust between or division between so-called elite and sort of populist kind of generation? Because your books is probably read mostly by so-called elite side, but I'm wondering how much this book is influencing general public, because that's what we need. You're trying to bridge between those those two divided group of people to narrowing the division. So,
like many divisions that we invent in our minds, this division also is a false dichotomy, like the elite and the people. you know, you have the richest person in the world, Elon Musk, and a group of other billionaires like Donald Trump, who is a billionaire, claiming that they are against elites. If you're not an elite, so what is an elite? Like the richest person in the world is not an elite. All these billionaires who are now running the US government, oh, they are not elites. Why? I mean, the word elite has become kind of a negative term that you just put on your political rivals. The fact is that every human group has an elite. I mean, you cannot run any group of people, not even a football club. You always have people who are more talented in this or have more power or more influence. This is just the nature of human society. The problem is not with the existence of elite. The main question to ask, is it a serving elite or is it a self-serving elite?
That's true.
If you have a group of people from a small group of friends all the way to an entire country or the whole planet, and the people who has the most influence there, they use their power only for their own self-benefit, this is a very bad situation. The ideal is that the people who have more talent in a particular field or more influence or more power, they use it for the benefit of society. The fantasy of we can just create a society without any elite, that never works. It's always a trick of some people to gain power for themselves. You know, the biggest experiment in creating completely equal society without any elite was communism, and we all know where this led to. So is North Korea a society without any elite? Maybe because there is just one.
Yes.
But this is not what we should be aiming towards. I think especially for an institution like this, yes, and for all universities, the purpose is not to destroy elites or break down all barriers between this group. The purpose is to create a serving elite.
Yes.
That people who they have more talent in a particular field, they have more influence in that particular field, and they use their talents and their power not just for their personal benefit, but for the benefit of all. That should be the aim.
So you also, in Nexus, you also talk about division between those who live in cyberspace versus physical space. And more people are now living in cyberspace and just following, let's say, tweets under 280 characters and X and so on. How should educational institutions like us and also K-12, secondary, primary education should tackle the challenge of having younger generation be able to read this size book, thought-provoking, books that makes us think, and we'll also discuss. But that's getting more and more difficult for us. So what's the role of education to basically maintain the intellectual ability of human being?
Yeah, I mean, in previous eras, educational institutions focused on providing people with information because information was scarce. It was a scarce commodity. Maybe you live in a distant town and there is just one library in the town with just 100 books. So just getting a book was very difficult. Now it's exactly the opposite. People don't need more information. We are flooded by enormous amounts of information. And the main thing to understand is that information isn't truth. The truth is a very rare subset of information. If you think about all the information in the world, so the truth is a very, very small percentage of that. Most information is junk. Most information is fiction and fantasy and lies and propaganda and so forth. And there is it's easy to understand why. The truth is costly, whereas fiction is cheap. If you want to write a truthful account of anything, you need to do research. You need to spend time on analyzing it, on fact-checking it. It takes time and effort and money. Fiction is very cheap. You just write anything that comes up in your mind, very cheap. Secondly, the truth tends to be complicated because reality is complicated. Like if you want to write an account about quantum physics, it's complicated. Whereas and people usually don't like complicated narratives. They want simple stories. Yes. And again, fiction can be made as simple as you would like it to be because you just invent it. And finally, the truth is often painful. Not always, but some parts of reality are uncomfortable. You know, from the level of individual, this is why people go to therapy, because if it was everything about me was so pleasant and fun, I wouldn't need a therapist to help me acknowledge the painful memories or painful patterns that I have inside myself. And this is true all the way to entire nations that often don't want to recognize some painful parts of their history or of their society. So the truth is sometimes painful. Fiction can be made as flattering as you would like it to be. So in this competition between costly and complicated and painful truth and cheap, simple, attractive fiction, fiction wins. And the world is flooded by enormous amounts of fiction. The job, the task of institutions like universities, like newspapers, is not just to provide people with more information. They have too much of it. To provide them with a method to find these rare gems of truth inside the ocean of information and to know how to tell the difference. So, you know, as a historian, the main thing I teach my students in history class is not facts about the past. Oh, this king won that battle against that king in that year. They don't need me. They can just Google it. What they still need to learn in history department is how do I tell the difference between a reliable historical source and an unreliable source. A source may be something I just read today on the internet. How do I know if I can trust this TikTok video or not? A source can be something from the Middle Ages. You find a document from 1,000 years ago. How do you know the king wrote that he won this battle? How do you know whether to believe? Because people lied also 1,000 years ago, not just today. So that's the main question. And that's in every scientific discipline, of course, it's a bit different. But the key question is not about getting more information. It's about how do we tell the difference between reliable and unreliable information. The same thing in experiments,
yes.
in physics or in chemistry. How do I know whether this experiment was ran correctly and I can trust the outcome, or there was some problem and I shouldn't trust it?
You said truth can sometimes be painful. And indeed, reading Nexus brought me, a wide variety of emotions. But at the same time, it gave me hope that it's not too late. And there's a, human nature that is, that can ability to self-correct and also ability to cooperate, work together. If only we had time, I suppose, right? Before AI gets somewhere else. There should be a way for us to cope with this. And this is why, as Professor Yamamoto stated, we established a so-called cross-dignity center where we, humanity and also social science professors, academicians get together to tackle exactly that. So if you were a research scientist at our Cross-Dignity Center, oh, by the way, you're welcome to join us anytime.
Thank you.
What would be the research topic of yours?
How to build trust between humans. I think that is the most urgent, because what we see now in the world is a collapse of human trust, exactly when we need it most. The biggest danger in the world still is not AI. It's the distrust between humans. If humans could trust each other and cooperate, we could still devise ways to develop AI in a safe way. It's the distrust between humans that make the AI revolution so dangerous. So I would focus on that. It's not too late to build enough trust between human beings to keep AI under control.
And what would be your approach to tackle this challenge of, building trust?
I think we need input, and this is why an interdisciplinary center is the ideal place to do it, because no single discipline can tackle this question by itself. You need input from biology and psychology, because we are still animals. You need to understand our animal inheritance. And you can learn a lot from how chimpanzees, for instance, build trust or fail to build trust between themselves to understand how humans function. You need the input, from economics, of course, from computer science, because today all social systems are based on the new information technology. So a lot of lessons about how to build trust between humans that were very successful until, say, 10, 20 years ago are now obsolete. Because now humans communicate through computers. And if we don't understand this new technology that is now mediating between, and there is a huge discussion about what has caused this collapse of human trust over the last 10 or 20 years. It's a paradox, because humanity is in the best condition we were ever in. You look at most of the kind of hard data, things like child mortality, like disease, like famine, it all goes down. We are in the best situation ever, and yet people are so angry and so frustrated and can't talk with each other. What happened? What happened is that a new technology came between humans. And now most human communication is mediated by a non-human agent, which is creating havoc in the world. So to rebuild trust, we can't go back. We can't say, okay, let's just throw away all the smartphones and computers. It won't work. So we need to relearn how to build trust between masses of people with this mediation of information technology.
Your book is so readable. It's very different from academic writing, so to say. Do you do this intentionally?
Absolutely. I mean, I see my job as building a bridge between the world of academic studies, where mostly experts talk with other experts in a language that is very difficult for lay people without academic background to access. So I try to take the most up-to-date theories and models and findings of the academic and scientific community and relay it, explain it in a way that will be easily accessible, say, even to high school students or to any person who wants to understand what is this AI revolution. I never studied computers. I don't want to have all these graphs and equations. Can I understand in a simple language what is the AI revolution and what is the history of information? So this was the aim of writing the book.
And how do you feel that your effort is penetrating into cyberspace, those who live in cyberspace?
It's very difficult to know. I mean, you write a book, you release it to the world. Yeah. What impact it will actually have on people, very difficult to know. One of the things that helped the book is that it's not only me. My husband and I established a social impact company at the same time that 10 years ago that Homo Deus was published. And I'm in charge of writing the books, and he is in charge of all the business side. And we have a team of 20 people working for us. One of them is here in Tokyo. And with social media accounts and trying to take the ideas of the book and translate them into more and more media so they could reach more and more people. And whether this will be enough, we don't know. I mean, we feel that Each person has some little agency in the world. We try to do what we can and trust other people to do what they can. Yes. Nobody can carry the entire world just on their shoulders. If enough people do what they can in their small field of activity, I think we'll be okay.
Nexus just came out in Japanese, so that's why you're here.
Yeah.
But Nexus original version came out last year.
Yeah, in September in English.
How do you see the development, especially the Trump administration started, and there are so many developments globally. How do you?
So far, it's been very worrying. Again, because of the accelerating erosion of trust within societies and between societies. We see that the international order is collapsing. Again, the international order established after the Second World War, its most important taboo, its most important rule was that strong countries cannot just invade and conquer weaker countries. And this was in complete opposite to thousands of years of previous history, when, for thousands of years, this was the ordinary thing, that a stronger country would just invade and conquer its neighbors and establish a bigger country, an empire. And humanity enjoyed in the early 21st century the most peaceful and prosperous era in its history, largely because this taboo was maintained. There were conflicts in parts of the world. I come from the Middle East, I come from Israel, I know this perfectly well. It was not a perfect order, but it was better than anything that existed previously. You could see it most easily in the budgets of governments. For most of history, more than 50% of the budget of every king and shogun and emperor was on the military. Soldiers, warships, castles, this was the main government expenditure. In the early 21st century, average government expenditure on the military went down to about 6% or 7%. This amazing achievement. About 10% went to healthcare. It was the first time in human history that governments all over the world spent more on healthcare than on the military. This is now going in reverse. As a result of Russia's invasion of Ukraine and of other developments, you see defense budgets skyrocket, and this will come at the expense of healthcare and education. And frankly, the Trump administration is not making things any better. You listen to Trump blaming Ukraine for the war, and it's very clear that what he has in mind is a world order in which the proper thing is for the weak to obey the strong. Right. And if the weak refuse to obey the strong, the weak are to blame for the resulting conflict.
Right.
And you see it like all over. It threatens that the United States now wants to conquer Greenland. Now, if Denmark and Greenland say, but we don't want to be part of the US, and as a result there is a war, in Trump's mind, who is to blame for that? Denmark is to blame. Because the United States is strong, you must obey the strong. If you don't obey the strong and there is a war, the weak are to blame. They should have obeyed the strong. Now, this kind of worldview, this kind of logic, will bring all humankind back to a constant state of war. And in this situation, it's not just healthcare and education budgets that will go down. Any chance of regulating AI, it will not be possible, because every country will say, we have to win the AI race. We are not going to do anything that might slow us down, and then the other side wins, and then they are the strong, and we have to obey them.
Yet, your book gives us a hope.
Again, as long as we haven't reached that point, there is still hope. And if enough people do the right thing in the coming months and years, humanity will still be okay.
Thank you so much. Time's up, she said. So, thank you so much, Yuval. This has been so wonderful, and so we're so delighted to have you. So thank you so much. We stay here to receive more questions.
ハラリ教授、塾長ありがとうございました。Thank you, Professor Harari and President. では続けて、塾生との質疑応答の時間に入らせていただきます。
Thank you for great discussion. I was really impressed as a co-director of the Cross Dignity Center. Now I'm thinking about a new project in the Cross Dignity Center, which is related to how to trust human beings. Thank you very much. So I'm going to speak in Japanese for Japanese students and Japanese reporters. And due to editing issues of news organizations, so I'd like you to ask a question in Japanese. Okay. Yeah, I know you students can speak English fluently, but editing issue. Thank you. OK. じゃあ、日本語を喋ります。ご質問、いろいろ学生じゃない方もたくさん来ていただいていますけれども、今回、この後、学生との対話の時間にしたいと思っておりますので、学生からの質問を受け付けたいと思います。それではいかがでしょうか、早速ですが。じゃあ、そちらの方、お願いできますか。はい、すみません。
非常に示唆に富んだディスカッションありがとうございました。2点質問させていただきたいんですけれども、まず1点目が、先ほどおっしゃられていたようにAI が台頭して AI が独自にネットワークを築く一方で人間の間では非常に深刻な分裂が生じているっていう現状認識をされていて、私もそれは非常に同意するところであります。でそのそういった状態においてAI を通したりアルゴリズムを通して会話をすることによってより分裂が深まっていっていると思うんですけれども、それによって我々がこれまで広く共有していたナラティブも分裂していっているように思います。でそうした分裂した状況の中でサピエンス全史以降ハラリさんが繰り返し論ってきたサピエンスの特有の集団性を確立して維持する役割を果たしてきた共同主観的現実というのは今後の社会においてどのような役割を果たすと考えているでしょうか。お聞かせください。
So yes, our special ability as Homo sapiens is to organize very large cooperation between thousands and millions of billions of people through shared stories, through shared narratives, not just about gods and religions, but also in the economy. Like the most successful story ever invented is probably money. That it's the only story that everybody believes. Not everybody believes in God, in this God or that God, but even people who completely disagree about other things. You know, you look at the United States, Republicans and Democrats cannot agree about anything except the dollar. If a Republican comes with $1, the Democrat will accept it and sell whatever it is, bread or gasoline, and vice versa. Even this is now under threat with cryptocurrency.
Yes.
Because there are the people who say, we don't want the dollar, we want crypto. And this is a very important indication because dollar is human currency. It's produced by human institutions like banks. Crypto, like Bitcoin, Ethereum, and so forth, is a post-human currency produced by algorithms. The people who say, I don't trust dollar, I trust Bitcoin, what they actually say is, I don't trust humans, I trust algorithms. I don't trust the humans who run the banks. I prefer to trust the algorithms who run the cryptocurrency networks. Now, and this you see in more and more areas. Also, you talked about bureaucracy earlier. So you see at the same time that Elon Musk and Donald Trump, they are firing tens of thousands of human bureaucrats, but they are not really against bureaucracy because they simply replace them with digital bureaucrats, with algorithms. And this is the shift in power from humans to algorithms. When it comes to stories, this is where social media is most relevant. That previously all the stories that circulated in the world, they came from the human mind, and it was human editors who decided what stories will dominate the conversation. Like you have a newspaper or you have a TV station, so you have a human editor going over all the stories that were published today and say, oh, this is the most important story, we'll publish this on the front page. And everybody reads this and talk about it. Now this job too is done by an algorithm. If you ask who are the most important editors in the world right now, they are the editors of TikTok and Facebook and Twitter, and they are not human. They are algorithms. So the stories are being produced by and spread by non-human intelligence to maintain in human trust and cooperation. I think that it's not a complete solution, of course, but the first and simplest thing every government should do is pass a law banning fake humans, banning counterfeit humans. The same way there is a law that bans counterfeit money. You cannot just print yens and pretend this is real. No, you can't. Same thing with human beings. Until today, you couldn't create fake humans. Now you can. Bots can pretend to be humans. Much of the traffic in places like TikTok and like X Twitter is run by bots that pretend to be human beings. So the first and simplest step to take, have a very strict law. You cannot fake humans. AIs are welcome to talk with us on condition that they identify as an AI. If somebody tries to fake humans, or if a platform doesn't take action against fake humans, they should go to jail. The same way that if somebody has a printing press or print shop and people there try to print yens, what will happen to the owner of the print shop? He goes to jail. It should be the same thing, even worse, with trying to fake humans.
Thank you. 追加で何かありますか？
すいません。2点目なんですけど、それこそ、今その偽情報とかがこう流通している一方で、その今先ほどおっしゃられたその人間間の信頼をこう回復するというか確立するためのルールというものもおそらくフィクションであると思うんですが、そしてそのネクサスにおいてもそのフィクションによる秩序の安定とその真実の追求のバランスが重要であるというふうにおっしゃっていたと思いますが、その真実の追求によって修正されるべきフィクション、そのフェイクニュースのようなフィクションとその維持されるべき社会の安定化に寄与するようなフィクションの区別というのはいかにできるというふうに考えておられるかお聞かせください。お願いします。
When it comes to fake news and disinformation and all that, we need to differentiate between freedom of speech and freedom of information. Freedom of speech is given to human beings. It's a human right, a very important human right, which should be protected. Whether it is here in this hall, whether it is on TikTok or Facebook or anywhere else, human beings, except in extreme situations, should have the right to express their views without fear of being punished for it. This should be protected. Freedom of information is something very different. It's a new right which is given not to human beings, it's given to AIs and algorithms and bots. When a lot of the social media giants, they intentionally confuse the two rights. The problem on social media is not that human beings invent lies. Human beings have been inventing lies for thousands of years. Except in extreme circumstances, they should not be punished. But the problem is that then you have an algorithm that decides to deliberately spread lies and hate and so forth. And this should be stopped, and this should be punished. Again, it's not, if I'm a user on YouTube and I created a fake news video, I should not be punished for it. But if I'm the company and I deliberately recommend and play this hate-filled conspiracy theory to millions of people because I make money out of it, this should be punished. And this is not protected by freedom of speech, because this is done by algorithms, and algorithms don't have rights. They don't have a right to spread lies. It is the job of the social media companies, the same way it's the job of newspapers and TV stations, before they disseminate something, to make sure that it is the truth and it is not some hate-filled lies.
はい、ありがとうござい
ありがとうご
ます。
ざいました。
憲法の研究者としてはいろいろとコメントしたいところもありますけれども、はい、次に行きたいと思います。いかがでしょうか。じゃあ、どうですかね。はい、そうです。
はい、さまざまな問題に、触れた、とても示唆に富んだ、対談ありがとうございました。私からは先ほどご対談の中でもあった AI と戦争についてのご質問させていただきたいです。従来国家の有する財産というのは、天然資源などの有形の富でした。しかし現在ではデータやテクノロジーを用いた無形の知識へと変化していると思います。で AI を用いたサイバー戦争は、そういった後者を舞台にしていますが、それでも現在起こっているロシア・ウクライナ戦争のように爆撃をしたり生身の人間を殺害する人為的なカタストロフは終わっておりません。この先いくら高知能の AI が発達したとしても、憎悪の感情を持つ人間が存在する限り、そういった戦争の残虐性というのは残り続けてしまうのでしょうか。
Yeah, I mean, the physical world is still there. I mean, none of the development of information technology abolishes the physical world. It's another layer built on top of it. This has been, if you go back thousands of years, so all the information created by humans, whether it's laws and constitutions, whether it's religion, whether it's money, it did not replace or abolish the physical and biological reality. People still have bodies, they need to eat, they need clean water, but all this additional layer of stories, it enabled people to create things like trade networks that changed the way we get food. Like 100,000 years ago, you're hungry, you go to the forest, to the savannah, to the sea, you fish, you hunt, you gather fruits, you eat. Now, very few people do that. Almost everybody depends on a global trade network which is managed by information in order to get their food. So the same is likely to happen with AI, whether it's in peace or in war. War ultimately is still about killing people. But the way it is done is changing. What we saw in recent wars, not just in the Russian invasion of Ukraine, also I know it more from the war in my country between Israelis and Palestinians. A lot of people expected AI to change war by doing the actual shooting. Like people watched all these Hollywood movies about killer robots. So they now look on television and they don't see killer robots. The killing is still done by human beings. What really changed already with AI is who is choosing the targets, who is making the decisions. Who decided to bomb this building? Who decided to bomb this person? And increasingly the answer is AI. That this is something that happened really over the last 2-3 years. Previously, the job of identifying targets was done by human intelligence officers. They would gather all this information and start reading all these reports, and it would take them days to say, oh, this building, this is enemy headquarters, bomb it. Now it's done in seconds by AI. AI goes over enormous amounts of information that no human being can analyze. It spots patterns that no human being is able to spot, and within seconds says, this is enemy headquarters, bomb it.
But statistical probability, right?
With statistical probability and with a lot of other computer, very complex mathematical models. Of course, the big question is, can we believe the AI? Maybe it made a mistake. Maybe it told us to bomb a building which is civilian, not military. And I talk with different people, they tell me different stories. Some people say, oh, after the AI points to a target, we get human analysts to go over all the information and make sure there is no mistake.
Right.
Other people say, nah, the human analyst spends something like half a minute. Nobody can really check the AI. It goes over so many data points. So basically, they're just rubber stamp. And the one making the decision is AI. Now, I don't know, probably it's sometimes like this, sometimes like this. But looking to the future, 5 years, 10 years in the future, it's very clear what the trend is. That increasingly the AI will be making the key decisions in warfare, and this is, of course, a very dangerous development.
Thank you. 他いかがでしょうか。じゃあすみません。すみません。なんか全員やってられないとは思うんですが、すみません。
私からは反科学主義の思想についての質問をさせていただきたいと思っています。ホモデウスの文庫版の寄稿においても、ハラリ先生がおっしゃられていたように、コロナウイルスのワクチンの開発がとても大きなテクノロジーの発展だったとおっしゃっていました。それに対して反ワクチン派の思想や、それは陰謀論であるといった思想も多く見受けられました。それはフェイクニュースの話でもあると思うのですが、人類がこれまでやってきたような科学的に対する抵抗とか反発が見受けられるようなものでもあると思います。ハラリ先生がおっしゃっている AI が統制する世の中に対しても同じような反発が起きると思うのですが、そのような反科学的な思想に対してどのような具体的影響が得られるか、またそれに対してどのような対策を講じるべきかお聞かせいただきたいです。お願いします。
Theories are not something new. They've been around throughout history. This is related to what we mentioned earlier of a key difference between truth and fiction is the truth is complicated, fiction is simple. When there is something like a big pandemic that changes so many things, the truth of the pandemic is very complicated. Simply to understand what a virus is. A virus is such a strange thing. Humans, for most of history, never knew that viruses existed. Only in the last century, we really began to understand what viruses are. And the strange thing about them is that they are not exactly alive and not exactly not alive. There is a huge debate in the scientific community. Are viruses a form of life? Or are they part of biology? Or are they actually just some chemical information? Because a virus cannot reproduce by itself. A virus doesn't eat. It's not like a bacteria that eats things and reproduces. A virus is really just a bit of information. And the amazing ability of this bit of genetic code is to get into the cells of my body and tell my own body, my own cells, to start producing more copies of that code. So you start with one code, one line of code. It takes over a cell in my body. You get 1 million copies of that code. they spread to other cells. They tell the other cells, produce more copies of that code. This is how it goes viral. And this is such a strange thing. We don't see things like that happening on our level of reality. It's happening on a very, very small level of reality. So to understand how a pandemic begins and spreads, very complicated. It's much easier to believe a conspiracy theory. Oh, there is a group of very powerful people. They created this pandemic to take over the world. The one thing I can say as a historian is that these types of conspiracies are always wrong for the simple reason the world is too complicated for any small number of people to really understand it and manipulate it. The level of manipulation that conspiracy theories usually assume is completely unrealistic. You look at how governments, even if you have a government with all the power of a government that tries to do something, very often it fails. Like, I don't know, the Americans decide to invade Iraq. They are the strongest country in the world. They have all this military power, and they fail. Yes, they manage to conquer Iraq. Then everything goes off plan. And eventually it's Iran that becomes the main beneficiary, the victor of the war. So the Americans had one plan, something completely different happened. This is how the actual world functions. And conspiracy theories, they are usually this kind of wishful thinking that the world is a very simple place. If a couple of people in a room can plan to take over the world and then they just do it. It never happens.
Okay, thank you very much. 大丈夫ですか？はい。じゃあ、他の方いかがでしょうか？じゃあ、ちょっと前の方で、じゃあ、お願いします。
はじめまして。私からは AI と娯楽、人間の娯楽についてお聞きしたいです。そもそも今の社会ってSNS が発達していて、YouTube だったり X だったり TikTok だったりそういうのを見て人間が楽しさを得る社会じゃないですか。でそんな中でハラリ先生もおっしゃってるように人間がエリートと非エリートでより格差が拡大してしまう。で私としてはそのエリートと非エリートでなんか娯楽の形がより変化していってしまうのではないかなと思ったんですけど、ハラリー先生は今後の娯楽とか楽しみの形と意義、それはどう変化していくとお考えでしょうか？
Can you just say what will exactly change?
ハラリ先生は今後の娯楽の、形、そして意義がどう変化するとお考えか。
And we don't know, we can't predict, but it's very clear that more and more both the form and the content of entertainment will come from AI and not from human beings. Previously in history, all entertainment, whether it's poetry or theater, television, movies, everything came out of the human mind, of the human imagination. Now we have something on the planet that is capable of producing such things, perhaps certainly far more cheaply than human beings and far more efficiently, and also break out of the limitations of the human imagination. Because the human imagination is limited by the human brain, by our own biological limitations. AI isn't. So to take an example from a slightly different area, like the game of Go, in 2016 there was this very famous game between AlphaGo, an AI, and Lee Sedol, one of the Go world champion. And AlphaGo won. It was one of the decisive moments in the AI revolution. But the amazing thing about the game wasn't just that AlphaGo defeated the human world champion, it's the way he did it. It came up with strategies that were completely alien. That, humans have been playing Go in East Asia for thousands of years. It was invented more than 2,000 years ago. Tens of millions of people played Go. It was considered a form of art, not just a game. Entire philosophies developed around how to play Go, and yet, all those years, all those people, nobody ever thought of playing Go like AlphaGo. So you can imagine it like a landscape, like a planet Go, all the different ways to play Go. And humans have been stuck on one island in planet Go, and they thought this was the whole planet. For 2,000 years, they thought these are the only ways to play Go. They couldn't leave this mental island because our minds are limited. Then AlphaGo came and said, look, you can play like this, you can play like this, discovered entire new areas on the planet Go. The same thing is likely to happen in music, in painting, in theater, in television. It's already happening. So many people are now playing with using AI to create videos. And this is just the very beginning of the process. If you think the AIs of today are sophisticated, it's nothing compared to what we will have in 10 years. So, like other fields, also entertainment will change completely. And it's impossible to predict in what ways, because, and this is the nature of AI, is that it's an alien form of intelligence. So human intelligence cannot predict what the alien intelligence will do. If you can predict everything the AI is going to do, it's not an AI. It's just some automatic machine. Like if you have a coffee machine and you can predict everything the coffee machine will do, I press this button, it makes espresso. This is an automatic machine. It is not an AI. When is it an AI? When you press a button, or you don't even press any button. You just approach the machine, and the machine tells you, hey, I just invented this morning a new drink that I think you would like better than coffee, and I made you a cup. Then it's an AI.
Thank you. じゃあ他いかがでしょうか。じゃあそこの方とかいかがでしょう。はい、
対談ありがとうございました。私は、AI が、ある、社会の中で人間が、どのように合意を取っていくかっていうことについて、ご質問したいんですけれども、まず、AI っていうものは、人間が使用するインターネットの、利便性というものをとても高めていると思います。で、そういうふうになっていくと、人間と先ほどもお話しされていたようなそのエリートとそうでない人との、その隔絶っていうものがとても大きくなっていって、それとともにやっぱり価値観の多様化っていうものも大きくなっていくと思います。そうすると先ほどもおっしゃられていたようなその正しい情報っていうのが必ずしも出回るようにはなくなってしまっていって、その正しい情報を知っている人っていうのがその数的なマジョリティになり得ないっていう状態がかなり主流になっていくんじゃないかっていうふうに考えてはいるんですけれども、そういった社会の中で人間はどのように合意を取っていくべきだとお考えですか。お聞かせください。
Yeah, so as I said, I agree. This is the biggest question. How to reach agreement between humans in an era when communication between humans is being twisted and manipulated by the new information technology. I don't know. That's, and I was asked earlier, what is the research project? If I knew the answer, no need of research project, because we already have the answer. I think one of the most important thing in science is to admit ignorance. For me, the scientific revolution, looking back in history, was a revolution of ignorance, not of knowledge. Before science, every human group, every human culture said, we already know everything. Everything is in the holy books, or our holy men and sometimes holy women know everything. No need of new research. The scientific revolution was about people coming and saying, we don't know. We really want to know this, the answer to this question, and we don't know what it is. Oh, so we need to do research. And this is still the case right now. So again, if you ask me what is the most important research subject, not just for the research center here, but generally, I would say this is the research subject. And to like really kind of focus it, it's not a general question about how to establish trust between humans. It's how to establish trust between humans when they mostly communicate through this new technology of the digital infrastructure, of computers and social media and AI, and everything we thought we learned about building trust over thousands of years is coming into question. And we need more scientists, more scholars, more researchers focusing on that issue.
I think Professor Yamamoto and his colleagues will conduct this as a Yuval Harari project within the center. So you're welcome to join the center.
Yes, please. じゃあ他いかがでしょうか。じゃあちょっと真ん中のそちらの方お願いできますか。
とても興味深いお話を聞かせていただきありがとうございます。理工学部の学生として1点、ハラリ氏に質問させてください。その高度に技術だったり知見だったりが専門化された学術領域において、その一種のエコーチェンバー現象のようなものは、往々にして、生じるかと思います。で、ハラリ氏の執筆したネクサスでも、それに関してはそのパブリッシュアペリッシュ、つまり出版可視化っていうような観点から、可能性は低いであろうというふうにおっしゃられていたかと思いますが、神経科学を私自身専攻している身として、その科学っていうのは従来の、常識っていうのを、打ち破って新たに再定義する、ことも重要であるっていうふうに考えています。でこの意味でその、もしその将来これから出てくる AI っていうのがそのエージェントとして、その働くというのであれば、その人間が、これまで、リードしてきた研究に対して AI がリードする研究っていうのはそのようなエコーチェンバー現象がより起こりやすくなっていくのか、それともそのままなのか、もしくは起こりづらくなっていくのかということに関して、ご意見を聞かせていただきたいと思います。
Yeah, AI is now revolutionizing scientific research, as you said. We just saw Nobel Prizes, 2 Nobel Prizes in physics and in chemistry actually go to AI. I was especially amazed by the AI Nobel Prize in chemistry, which was given to the developers of AlphaFold. And I mean, they're brilliant people. I'm not sure they are chemists. I mean, they needed deep understanding of chemistry to develop AlphaFold, of course, but their background is not in chemistry. But their creation completely changed chemistry and will change biology and will change medicine production by solving this huge scientific puzzle of predicting how proteins fold. Now, what this tells us is not just that AI will become better than humans in more and more scientific areas, but that it will be able, as you said, to break the barriers. Humans have a limited capacity. Like I study history for many years, I don't have time to study physics deeply or to study chemistry deeply. This is why we have this division in the university. This is the physics department, this is history department. You can't do both. For AI, there is no limitation like that. So in a way, AI could bring a much more holistic approach to science. Maybe not AlphaFold, maybe not the AI of today, but the AI of 10 years from now you can have an AI network which understands very deeply chemistry and economics and history and can combine data and models from all these very different disciplines. And it will, the question then becomes, so what would be the role of humans in such a situation? And again, we don't know. I mean, given the pace of development and the potential, it's not clear. What would be still, what could humans contribute to research in 10 or 20 years?
Thank you very much. じゃあすみません、時間そろそろ来ているのですが、最後の質問にしたいと思いますが、じゃあそちらの方でいかがですか。ちょっとはい。じゃあ一つだけにしていただければと思います。
はい、わかりました。僕からは、コンピューター間のインターサブジェクティブリアリティについて、質問させていただきたいと思います。ネクサスの中でコンピューターの間のインターサブジェクティブリアリティ、あるいはコンピューターと我々の間のインターサブジェクティブリアリティっていうのが今後増えていくと書かれていたと思います。で、そうした現実は私たちにとってはとても複雑で、そして異質であるがゆえにとても理解しづらいものであるになると予想されていました。しかし、それがたとえ異質であるからといっても、あるいは異質であるがゆえに私たちはそれを理解するように努力し続けると、僕は思いますし、そうした理解しようとする鋭意こそがその AI の暴走を食い止めるというか、その手段の一つになりうると思っています。で、その歴史を振り返ったときに、そのネクサスの中にもありましたが、例えば聖書にするとか、あるいはそうした書物にする、あるいはその神様の像を作るであるとか、聖人のイコンを作るであるとか、物化すると、現実を物化するというのが、そうしたその現実を多くの人が理解しやすくするような手段の一つであると思っていますし、それは現在でもそのディズニーランドでミッキーマウスの着ぐるみが動いているっていうのは、その特に子どもたちにとってはその架空のキャラクターが現実にあるんだというその現実性っていうのを分かりやすく示す手段の一つだと思います。で、そうした中でそうした観点で見るときにコンピューター間のインターサブジェクティブリアリティといったものをそのビジブルでタンジブルな形に表現するためには、どういった手段があるだろうとお考えになられますか。
Yeah, I'm afraid I again have to say that I don't really know, that this is again one of these frontiers of knowledge and research which we should invest in. Maybe I take an example now from economics. I talked earlier about money being the most successful story ever invented. Money is not an objective reality. It has no objective value. You can't eat it. Most money in the world is not even coins and paper notes. It's just information in computers. But money is now undergoing a revolution with the rise of cryptocurrencies. The next revolution might be the appearance of money that only computers understand. Cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin, they are produced by algorithms, but their value still depends on the belief of human beings. When Trump gets elected, value of Bitcoin goes up because humans believe, oh, Trump will deregulate crypto, so I better invest in Bitcoin, and then more people think like that, and the value of Bitcoin goes up. So it's still human belief that is the basis for the value of cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin. The next step is for digital currencies whose value depends only on the beliefs of AIs and algorithms. Even today, a large part of the trade in the world, especially trade in bonds and stocks and foreign exchange, it's just algorithms trading with other algorithms. And especially if humans deregulate the financial markets, which is what the Trump administration is all about, so we are likely to see new financial devices, new kinds of money, which only AIs understand, and AIs trade with other AIs. And what happens in a world when humans no longer understand finance? This can happen in 10 years or so. Like, think about it from, think about horses and money. People have been buying and selling horses for money for thousands of years, but the horses never understood what was happening. The horse could see that, say, one samurai is giving some piece of shiny metal to a merchant and gets me, the horse, in return. But what was happening there? What is this worthless piece of metal? The horses never understood money. Only humans understood them, which is why we control the horses and not vice versa. In 10 years, our life could be managed by financial transactions between algorithms that we can't understand. That whether we get a loan to buy a house will be decided by algorithms talking with algorithms in a financial language which is unintelligible to human beings. Not because we didn't go to college or but simply because it's mathematically, the algorithms can have mathematical models of the economy which are too complicated for the organic human brain. What is the meaning, say, for democracies if not even the prime minister or the finance minister understand finance anymore? There is a financial crisis, but no human being understands why there is a financial crisis and what can be done about it. And it's not just a problem for democracies, also for dictatorships. The biggest fear of every dictator in history is to have a subordinate that becomes more powerful than me. Like if you're Putin or if you're Kim, your biggest fear, the thing that keeps you up at night, is maybe the defense minister is plotting against me. Maybe some army general will have a coup and kill me, take my place. That's the biggest fear. And so for them, if AI becomes so powerful that I can no longer understand the AI, it's a threat even to human dictators. So this is a kind of intersubjective computer reality which we are likely to see very soon, especially if we deregulate financial markets. Again, the same way that a government can have a law, no fake humans, AIs can't pretend to be humans. Governments can also regulate financial markets. No, all financial devices that are tradable in the market must be vetted by humans. We don't allow. But with the current trend, we are likely to see a post-human financial system very soon. And if there is a big financial crisis in the post-human financial system, the humans will suffer greatly.
Thank you very much. それはちょっと時間が来ましたので、学生からのご質問はここまでとしたいと思います。今日は慶應義塾の一貫校の生徒さんたちも学生さんいらっしゃったということですけど、おそらく当てられなかったのではないかなというふうに思っています。お詫びを申し上げたいというふうに思います。それではですね、ここで質疑応答、それから今日のシンポジウムをここまでとしたいと思います。本当にハラリさん、学生の質問非常に誠実にお答えいただきましてありがとうございます。それから伊藤さんも非常にディスカッション、素晴らしいディスカッションありがとうございました。じゃあお二人に盛大な拍手をお願いいたします。
Thank you.
Thank you. では最後にハラリ教授から本日の対談と質疑応答のご感想と学生へのメッセージを頂戴したいと思います。Professor Harari, in closing, please could you give us your thoughts on today's talk and Q&A sessions and a message to the students?
Oh, closing remarks. So there is a lot to think about. There is a lot to research. Again, the key thing, many of the things we talked about sound very frightening. Part of the problem is you have the people who, in the companies that develop the AI, that talk about all the positive potential of AI. So to balance it, you need philosophers and historians and critics who say, wait a minute, there are also dangers. So I find myself in occasions like this talking mainly about the dangers. But of course, there is also enormous positive potential. Otherwise, nobody would develop the technology in fields ranging from medicine to preventing catastrophic climate change. And it's definitely there. There is enormous positive potential. The question is not how to stop the development of AI. This is unrealistic and undesired. We want to develop it. We just want to do it in a safe way. And here, again, the key is to build trust between human beings. There is a lot that every person can do in your specific field. So, sometimes people feel crushed by the weight of the world, that, all these problems, how can we... So don't feel like the whole world is just on your shoulders. There are more than 8 billion other humans on the planet, so they share in this weight of holding the planet. And of course, there are not just humans, there are also animals and plants and other organisms, and each one doing their small little thing. When I think about trust, which was maybe the major theme of our meeting, maybe I would leave you with the following thought, that trust is really the foundation of life, in the sense that if you don't trust others, if you don't trust what is outside you, you cannot live for a single minute. Because even the air we breathe, like this simple movement that sustains life, the breath, what is it? It is trusting in what is outside us. You have all these people today, including the most powerful people in the world, that they want to be separate. All they think about is separating things, building barriers and borders and walls. And actually, complete separation is death. Every moment, we have this simple gesture of trust in what is outside us. We open our mouth or our nose and we take in something from the outside. We have trust in it. And then we give it back. And this is the in and out movement of trust that sustains life. If you don't trust what is outside you and you just block your mouth and your nose, you die within a minute or two. So yeah, I know there is a lot of reason for anxiety, for fear. It's real. It's not imaginary. There are huge problems in the world. But ultimately, the basis of life is trust. Thank you.
The key issue is that democracy is based on trust, whereas dictatorship is based on terror. If you systematically destroy trust in institutions, destroy trust in the media, in academia, in the courts, and so forth, some people think that this is liberating the people from these institutions.
Right.
It's not. When you destroy all trust, the only thing that can still work is a dictatorship. Right. So this is what would-be dictators do. They systematically destroy trust. And the other thing to realize is that the vast majority of information is not truth. A key misconception, especially in places like Silicon Valley, is to equate information with truth. Most information is junk. Because, to write a truthful story, you need to invest a lot of time and effort and money in research and fact-checking, whereas fiction is very, very cheap.
Another story is about Tiberius, the Roman Emperor Tiberius. He was afraid to be assassinated, like all emperors. Unfortunately for him, the commander of his bodyguard, Sejanus, was an extremely ambitious person also. Sejanus convinced Tiberius to move to live on the small island of Capri, telling Tiberius that there he will be safer, because it would be easier to protect him against assassins and spies and so forth. And Tiberius moved to live in Capri. But then Sejanus controlled all the information that reached the emperor. It was very easy for him. But nobody could get to Capri. No letter could reach the emperor unless it passed through the hands of the bodyguards. And Sejanus became the real ruler of the Roman Empire because he controlled all the information reaching Tiberius. And if somebody tried to make a move against him, he could always tell Tiberius that this person was conspiring against him or was a threat and should be eliminated. And to some extent, this is true of all of us. All of us can find ourselves isolated on an island, maybe a digital island, and whoever controls the information that reaches our ears and eyes control us.